First, I want to give a shout out to my fish. They're in the corner, and you can see it there. And they're on. You can't really see them very much, but I put a bit more water in there because they're getting a little bit bigger. I am getting concerned though because they're getting. There's quite a lot of orange ones in there, and they're getting larger and larger and larger. They're fine right now because most of them are still very, very small. But give it another 3 months and they're going to be massive. So, but yeah, it will be fine. I'll just take some back to the shop and see. But yeah, I came across a video and I guess I just want to talk about it because I have a few things to say.
The UK is now the second most depressing country to live in officially. Taxes...
When it comes to statements like that, I feel like I just shouldn't listen to them because it's almost like they're saying that deliberately because they're warning you that this video is going to be very depressing. But yeah, on one hand though, I feel like people had high expectations when it comes to England and Britain because it used to be such a nice place 20 years ago. And it's just getting worse and worse. And I remember when I first came to Birmingham, my sister would go on about all the amazing projects that were going to happen, the night market, the university was going to be so much better. You know, she was showing me all these different projects online. She spent a long time showing me all how amazing Birmingham was going to be in 7 years' time. None of that happened. Like, there's maybe one or two things did happen. There was one or two buildings that got knocked down and rebuilt, and it does look better. Does it look particularly better? No. Why? Because I'm walking through Aston University and I'm just seeing all these people that look like jihadists. Like there's so many people that just look dangerous, and therefore to me a nice country isn't about how nice it looks. It isn't about how pretty it looks. It's about how safe you feel. It's about how looking around at the people thinking, do I have anything in common with these people? Are these people similar to me? You know, if I'm walking around and I just think that these people look like zombies, then I feel more and more depressed because I feel like these people aren't like me. It's like, it feels like there is a massive Islamic takeover going on in Birmingham. And all over the country. I don't know how bad it is, but I'm hearing a lot of things about it happening in Bradford and just a long list of other places. Even Telford was supposed to be a high one. I didn't know there was many Islamic people in Telford, and I heard some. So I'm hearing things, and I don't know what the truth is, but I'm getting more and more depressed by it. Why? Because I seem to be reminded every single day that our country is declining and that the Islamic takeover is happening, and I don't agree with anything in Islam, and I don't like a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of Christians that are completely mentally ill, but the mentally ill people in Islam actually kill people. Why? Because their religion tells them to do it. You know, I found a completely insane Christian the other day who was going on about how the last time he had an episode he almost spilt blood or something. I don't know what he meant by that. Was he talking about his own blood or was he talking about other people? I don't know. But I know that if that mad Christian was Islamic, he would be a mass murderer by now. But it's only because he chose Christianity over Islam that he probably hasn't slaughtered loads of people. But he looks close. He looks very much on the edge of it. So when you've got mad people exist in every culture, every religion. But when you've got mad people and then you mix it with Islam, that is when you get people that want to blow people up. And you know, however much you want to insult other religions, Islam is the worst. Why? Because that actually says that it's okay to kill people. So if you've got mad people and then you mix it with beliefs that say it's okay to kill non-Muslims, that is when you are going to have a massive problem. Now, okay, I think everything in Islam is backwards and upside down. So you'll get all the Muslims who want to cover up and say, although this has got nothing to do with our religion, this has got nothing to do with Islam, when in reality it has got exactly something to do with Islam. You know, mad people and Islamic views will cause some sort of disaster because that is what it preaches. And if Islamic people are just a bunch of ignorant people that want to try and cover things up and not see the truth and not face the truth, you know, you are going to get a problem. So if you're tackling terrorism, you really need to recognize that this similarity and stop just calling people far right if they have these views. You are actually a far left for not realizing that there is a link between Muhammad's views on it being fine to kill other people versus mad people and their links or association to choose that religion. You've got to recognize that there's a similarity there. But yeah, I feel like England is very, very depressing. Why? Because when you go to a depressing country where they have so much poverty, so much stuff, or so much poverty and problems, you know that there's problems there. So you go there expecting that or knowing that. Or if something bad happens, you would kind of be like, well, this always happens. Whereas in England, you had higher expectations, and I always used to see England as, okay, I don't like the people very much, but I used to think of the castles and the National Trust properties, which are so gorgeous and so pretty. And yeah, the whole thing's declining. The thing is, though, there is something good and bad, but I wanted to talk about it.
Are at a post-war record high, up to 45, most depressing country to live in officially. Taxes are at a post-war record high, up to 45% income tax on what you earn, then 20% VAT tax on what you spend. If you're a business, you have VAT, then 25% corporation tax, then business rates, then 15% national insurance. Then you've got council tax, road tax, car tax, stamp duty tax. There are 39 different taxes that you pay. The town centres are in ruin, they're run down, there's empty high streets and increasing homelessness. You get stabbed for a watch in London, and petty crime is now legal in the UK.
So yeah, I agree that high taxes is really, really bad, but there is good and bad in everything. And the good thing about high taxes is it means that the government has a lot of money. Now, this just means that if the government has a lot of money and the people have no money, it just means that the government need to get their shapes in order and do things properly, because if you have so much money, that means that you have the power. Now, if you have the power and you're giving money to people, give them £50 a week so that they can rob people and stuff. If you find people that are causing crime and causing problems and you are actually giving them funding, I think there needs to be a proper, I'm hoping that you have a proper record on who gets what, how much you get it. And you know what? I think you should even have some sort of loan system. If you have people that you're giving them money to, if you're giving people money, okay, they don't have to pay it back, but I think you should see it as a type of loan, because that is what a business is. If the whole point of bringing or helping refugees or helping people that should belong in other countries, helping them live in this country, if the whole point of you doing it is so that they can start contributing, start getting a job, learn how to immigrate and assimilate into the country so that they can start getting a job and paying for things, you have to see this as a type of loan. The money that you're giving them is in a way a type of loan. You are saying we're going to pay for £1,000 a month for these people to live. Now, if that's £12,000 a year. Now we assume that at some point we're going to start getting this money back, and I think if you've got records on where your money goes and who you're actually spending it on, and then do sort of proper checks when it comes to crime, make sure the police officers are not bothering and wasting their time going to people's houses. Why? Because they showed up outside a refugee hotel. I mean, what's the crime there? If you're getting police officers to work, you have to make sure they're actually looking at crimes and actually thinking about what a crime actually is. Was a crime committed if a father takes his daughter to outside a refugee camp, and if someone in there asks him what he's doing there? That is not a crime. There is no crime there. So police officers should not be wasting their time on things that are not criminal. And if people are saying, oh, someone robbed my house and I've had a break-in, actually get the footage of who was in that area at that time, who actually did it, and actually try to find who these people are. If you actually try and find the criminals and then try and work out how many of these criminals have actually been taking in from the benefit systems, because I think it would be incredibly annoying to think that a huge number of people that go into shops and then just walk out with huge shopping bags that they haven't paid for. How many of these people have actually been paid by the government to live here? Because that is where your problem is. I don't think high taxation is a good idea. High taxation is a really bad idea. Why? Because it's going to keep people in poverty, but it's going to make the government very, very rich. Now, if the government are actually spending their money wisely on the right people, on the right things, I had I had a phone call. I think I found something online about getting free installation in your loft, and I've got insulation on the bottom, but I don't have it on the ceiling. And a few years ago, I knew that they were offering all these grants and stuff, but because I wasn't on any type of benefits, I couldn't get any benefits. They only offer benefits to people that are already getting benefits. It's totally unfair. It's like if you can say you can only get a free entry to Autumn Towers, providing you are only paying, you've got some sort of card that makes you only get in there half price. Only people who are getting half price deals can get a full price deal, get the whole thing off. I mean, that to me does not make any sense. So I don't know what you're doing when it comes to that. Why are you only giving benefits to people who are already getting benefits in other ways? Benefit system should be about helping people who are not getting benefits, helping people who need help but do not actually have any other type of help. You can't just help some people too much and help other people not at all, because you might find that this is when the people that don't contribute, the wrong kind of people. Sometimes people need help for different reasons, but if people are just living off the government and just trying to get as much free things as possible, allowing a system that allows these people to get even more whilst other people have to pay for things, it's not good. But when taxes are high, it means that the government has a lot of power. Now, if the government is screwing the country up, which is what a lot of people think is happening, and what I think is happening, which is why I'm no longer trusting the government, if people think that the government are just messing things up, then them having all this power is not a good thing, because they're going to be funding the wrong things, they're going to be funding the wrong kind of people, and they're not going to be putting their money in the right areas. So high taxes is bad, but only if the government is taking this money and spending it in the wrong way. I have got someone, I think next Thursday they're going to put in an installation in the attic part. It's going to be a nightmare there because there's a lot of boxes up there, but I'm going to take down quite a lot of boxes and then hopefully just be able to move the rest of the boxes from one side to the other whilst they do the work. It might be a bit of a obstacle course, but I think it's possible, and I think I need to look in there to see what else is in there. There's a lot of kid stuff. Most of the stuff in there is my mum's a hoarder, so she can never throw anything away, and because she doesn't want me to throw any of her stuff away, most of the stuff in there is actually kid stuff from things that I had when I was a kid, and she has been refused to throw away. But since Sophie's got 2 kids, I might be able to find more things that I can get rid of. But yeah, that's what I was just saying with this.
The cost of living is soaring, and inflation has wiped out 35% of your money in the last 5 years alone. You work 3 days out of 5 for the government, and you pay £4,000 a year in government debt interest. Then when you finally pay off your house and you retire,
I don't understand where this interest and debt, like, who are we in debt to? I'm confused. I mean, is it just that we're buying oil from countries and then we're getting in huge debt because we haven't actually paid off this money, and therefore we owe all these countries money? Because if all we're doing is taking people from these countries into our country and our country is the one in the debt, then technically this is probably this could be the reason why all the poor people, why all these people are coming into this country. Well, because our country is in debt, and anyone who lives in our country is also going to be in debt because the country is in debt. So maybe it's just maybe this is why smarter people are starting to leave, because we're no longer seeing England as a rich country. We're seeing this as a country in debt, a country where the government is just taking huge amounts of money and then using it to house third worlders. Maybe this is the point. You're going to invite loads of third worlders into this country, and then all the smart people can go and live somewhere else and just forget about this country. Whilst in a way, it feels like that's what's happening, and I'm wondering if that is what's happening. Are the people who are smart realizing that England's now just a big dump, and they're just saying, okay, well, we'll just let lots of foreigners, not foreigners who are similar. If people are coming from France into England, they're going to be similar. They have similar values. They have a similar way of life. In Germany as well, a lot of places in Europe are similar, but the thing is, a lot of these people that are coming from France and Germany aren't actually from France and Germany. They're actually from Africa and all these places. They've gone from all these other poorer countries into this country, into these France and Germany countries, got some sort of citizenship, and then decided, you know what, we're going to move to England. And I feel like this is what's happening. We're taking in a lot of people from Europe, but a lot of people from Europe weren't actually from Europe. They started off there and have spent 10 years in Europe, and then have spent 10 years in England, and I don't know, but if a country is massively in debt because of giving huge amounts of wealth to some other country, and if the people from that country are actually just coming here, then they're going to find themselves coming to a country of debt, even though they will not. I don't understand debt, and I don't understand where you're getting this money from. I mean, maybe it's just the banking systems, and the banking systems have just said, you know, we've got our own little country somewhere. That's kind of what makes me think that's happening. There's some sort of country somewhere that's not known about by the rest of the world, and this country is just basically where all the. I actually want that to be the truth. That actually sounds quite a nice thing. You know how Israel was created. There was a lot of Jews all over the world, and they wanted a homeland. They knew exactly which piece of land was their homeland, and in 1948 some sort of homeland for the Jewish people got started, and this is where they all lived. You know, I want to believe that there is some piece of land, maybe near California or somewhere like that, that just houses all like the nice people, all the good people who can see the truth, the people that don't want to spend huge amounts of taxes just for it to go to third worlders so that they can come into this country, get £50 a week just to steal and destroy the shops. You know, there's a Tesco's up the road that I used to go past all the time, but it was clear that they needed bouncers. So for the last 2 years, they've had bouncers outside it. It's a tiny shop, and I'm thinking, how can this Tesco's run? It's a tiny shop, and it has one, maybe even two. Sometimes I've seen two bouncers out there, and I'm often seeing police officers, because there's a lot of homeless places. There's a lot of homeless tables. There's one south of it, there's one actually right opposite it, and then there's one around the corner. So there's 3 homeless places within a 5-minute walk of these 2 shops. The Sainsbury's has managed to survive because it's a bit bigger. The Sainsbury's is a lot bigger, but the Tesco's is about half the size of the Sainsbury's. The Sainsbury's and Tesco's are opposite each other. The Sainsbury's is quite a large size. I think they do have bouncers on that one. But before you had these homeless lines, I don't know what they are, just queues of people queuing for apples and warm tea or something like that. Before you had these shops didn't need bouncers, and I'm noticing the decline of it, because I was here in 2017, and you know, this area was quite nice, and you've set up all these homeless things, you're doing people a favour, you're helping people, when really I'm looking in these queues, you know, I wouldn't stand in these queues. Why? Because I feel like I'm standing amongst thieves and just people that have no respect for others, because they're so depressed that they no longer care. You know, when you're in a state of depression and you can't care about others. Why? Because you need to put your own needs first. You realize that you are in survival mode, and if you're in survival mode, you need to steal, you need to do stuff to get things. But I'm wondering how many of these people are in this sort of survival mode whilst also receiving £50 a week from the government. I mean, £50 a week from the government is nothing if your rent is £100 a week. So by having rent incredibly high, you are going to create crime, because people don't have enough money to pay the bills, and you can offer them money and give them free money, but if they don't own a property and they have to spend all their money on rent, you know, that money that they get given is actually just going to be taken by the government. So it's not even going to them, it's going to them to help fund a housing system, which basically just makes the bankers rich, because that's the only one those are the only ones that have the money. People who invest huge amounts of money into banks so they can make 1% interest. Okay, the people who are actually dealing and working in the banks, that they make 1%, and I, you know, because there's the investors who put money into the banks, and then there's the people who work in the banks to get good deals or to negotiate loans with different people, and then you've got the people that you know think that they can pay off their debts and then really can't, and then there's a huge process to try and get back the houses and get back the money, and and stuff like this. But it's just a money grab where you invite loads and loads of people in, you give them a bunch of free housing. Why? Just so that the housing market can increase, so that the bankers can make more money on more expensive loans, bigger loans, and it's just greed. There's just nastiness has come into this country, and you've destroyed the shops, you've destroyed the culture, you've destroyed life, and it's almost like the people who have done this are doing this because they no longer care about England. If I left England to go to America, I don't think I would care about England. I think it would be sad because I feel like I have loads of memories of the castles that you built and the National Trust properties and the English heritage properties. But if the government has a huge amount of money, I guess the government can spend money on these places to keep them looking nice, to keep something nice about England. But if you have 3 homeless centres, or homeless queue centres where you get free food, you are going to be drawing all these bad people, and the Tesco's now has been closed down because obviously it was too small of a shop. Too many people were just taking things and then just walking out. They had to have bouncers, and the bouncers though are expensive, and I guess it was draining all their income. So that shop was not able to make any income because it was spending all the money on the bouncers and on the people that would probably attack the bouncers. And I've seen bouncers actually just let people steal and walk out, and they can't do anything. Why? Because if they did attack them, that person can go and sue that bouncer for attacking them. I mean, that's a totally ridiculous rule. And then you've had some sort of system where the government funds lawyers to defend people who are criminals, who don't deserve to be defended because they need to go to jail. But then you can't jail everyone because there's so many people. I think there's Tommy Robinson. His child had someone grab her bum when she was 8, which is it's a terrible thing, but it was a minor thing. There are a huge number of problems, and police might not be able to arrest people like that because they have bigger problems, they have bigger concerns, and because of that, because it might have not what he did might have not been an arrestable offence, or an offence that the police would have taken seriously, because he took it seriously, because he punished the guy and was holding him down until the police arrived. He was the one who ended up getting in trouble because the police probably wouldn't have done anything. If the police would have come, they would have said, okay, you touched the girl's bum, whatever, or just loosely. This is nothing compared to the other crimes that we're dealing with. On one hand, I can understand that because there are loads and loads of crimes. This was 5 years ago, and the amount of crime and amount of things that they've got to do, they've got a lot of people to arrest. So can they really arrest people just for pinching an 8-year-old's arse? That's a minor crime in relation. But yeah, if he's punching people over it and forcing them, or almost forcing the police to arrest this guy, even if the police haven't worked out if it's a crime or not, this would put him in a sort of questionable position, because he's the one who's actually committed the crime. It's not a crime to pinch an 8-year-old's bum, but it is a crime to punch someone. I kind of understand that. It should be a crime, or it should be frowned on, but at the same time, because you've invited so many people who are really causing problems, because you've invited so many of these people in, there's now a different standard of what a crime actually is, and there's so many problems, and shops and are losing out. Too many people are walking in, taking things, walking out, and even they would do that even if you give them £50 a week. Why would they do that? Probably if their rent is £100 a week. I mean, £50 actually is only one night in a hotel. So if you're only giving them £50 a week, then you're not giving them enough, because they don't have enough, and it's unfair that they should just get free money. But at the same time, if the housing is so expensive that they need £50 a day just to be able to afford their rent, they're going to turn to crime. They're going to turn to drugs or to things like this, and people are going to feel more and more depressed. And I think this problem of expensive housing is everywhere around Europe. So I don't believe England is the only one that's suffering from this. But yeah, it's like, I feel sorry for all the huge amount of tax that people pay. But when people come into this country, they're inheriting our debt. They're inheriting the high costs of living. it's impossible for young people now to get onto the housing market because the houses are so expensive in comparison to what they make. And if shops are all closing down, then the economy is closing down. And how is the government going to get money off the taxpayer if the taxpayer don't have any money because they're spending all on rent, or if they've got all their money tied up in a house that can only that's basically they're just living in it just so they don't have to pay rent. And if they've got £1 million flat in Hampstead or whatever, that they can only get this money by moving out to a different area and buying somewhere half the size, half the amount. But if a quarter of what they make is going on capital gains tax, then they don't feel like they can move, because they're not going to be this money isn't going to go to them, it's going to go to the government. I guess this on one hand gives the government more power. If someone bought a house for 25,000 and sold it 10 years later for £1 million and then decided to move to a smaller property, they get 250,000 to live off, which is a lot of money considering I live off about 6,000 a year. I live off 6,000 a year, so 250,000 can give you my life for the whole of my life, basically, because that's basically all the money. That's more money than I've lived off of my whole life. Okay, that's a lot of money. So it makes them very, very rich. But that same amount of money also is given to the government. The thing is, the government are doing stupid things with it, because the amount of money that I live off, you give twice as much of that to foreigners that just come here and just live off the state. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about it, because on one hand, the government having huge amounts of money gives them more power. So if they want to start helping certain people more than others, they can do that. The problem is, if the people who are making the choices about where the money gets spent, if they're helping people that are just turning to crime because they don't have any respect for the country or people here, then the decline is going to happen. People are not going to spend money on properties if they think a foreigner is just going to move into their property and they're not going to end up getting the rent that they were hoping to get from it. And if they are finding that they can't work because all their money gets taken by the taxpayer, then they're going to start becoming more and more dependent on these properties as their only form of income. Now, if properties are their only form of income, they're going to get more greedy when it comes to how much they can get per month for it. But people shouldn't be making huge amounts of money for simply owning a property. Because there's no intelligence there, and so therefore I feel like the government is just encouraging and inspiring a nation full of people who just live off doing nothing. Because if you work, and if you work hard, and if you do things that gain skills, then you're actually going to find that your salary gets taken from you, and you don't get any benefits because you're working, and because because the benefit money is going to help increase the housing market. I suppose if you've got a house, it's a different situation. But if I don't know. But there's definitely a massive decline, and I've actually lost this video. Should I make two of this video?